This simple technique is going to help you catch more fish, hands down. So it's the middle of summer here. I've been fishing dry flies for the past 2 days, and the one technique that I've used probably above all else is high sticking. It's a really important technique when you're fishing with dry flies, dry droppers, nymph and indicators, basically any technique that requires a drag-free drift. Techniques like streamer fishing or swinging flies, this doesn't apply to, but if you're trying to drift flies naturally downstream in a river, this technique is perfect for that. When fishing in rivers, we're never in control of the current. There's always going to be little differences in current on the surface and down below. There'll be faster bits of current, slower bits of current, and vice versa, and the fish sit in between all of these spots. The water that I've been fishing over the last 2 days has been ideal for this. Pocket water, really tight, a lot of cascades, deep pools with slower moving water in between, and this river behind me as well. Now, high sticking in its simplest form is lifting the fly line off the surface of the water to help the flies drift more naturally. If our fly line's on the water and interfering with all the currents that are between us and the fish, that's when our flies are going to begin to drag. So high sticking lifts that line off the water and allows our flies to drift perfectly down a river. So here, you can see if I cast up to that run that I want to fish in the still water, my fly line's sort of touching this faster water just here. If I cast long especially into the tail out of the new run that you want to fish, and your fly line out of your rod tip's touching this faster water at the head of the previous pool, that's when that fly is going to start to drag. So instead of casting longer, I'm just going to creep up slowly and shorten my line up. So my fly line out the tip of the rod doesn't touch the head of this previous pool. I'll cast up here and high stick over it, and you can see I get a much more drag-free drift. It doesn't pull quite as much, and that's the difference between fish eating it and not, especially when it's super clear and spooky like this. Righto, so again, I've got some variable current here. If I was to cast out into that seam where I want to fish and leave my rod tip down, this fly line that's stuck in the back eddy between me and the fly is pulling that fly and dragging the fly around. So that's where high sticking comes into its own. I'm still going to cast in the same spot where I want to fish, but I'm going to reach that fly line off the water and follow that rod tip along with the fly. So cast out, lift the fly line and most of the leader off the water, follow it with your rod tip. You don't want to have your rod tip in no man's land. You want to be right over your fly. And you also don't want to cock your wrist like this and bring that rod tip up straight in the air. That's going to drag the fly as well. When I high stick, I lock my wrist flat and keep that rod tip out away from me as far as I can. I'll do it side on so you can see. So if I cast out and cock my wrist like that, see how that leader and that fly wants to drag back towards me? I'm going to lock my wrist, have a relatively flat rod, and keep the rod tip as far away from me and over the top of the fly as I can. Kind of like that. Right, so in a fishing situation, if I were to fish this run, I cast out and I'm reaching as far as I can. Now there's levels to it. Sometimes we need to high stick nice and close to us. Sometimes we need to reach right up and out. Sometimes we don't even need to do a lot of it at all. It's always variable, and because the fly is always moving generally back towards us or sort of sideways against us, we're always moving and manipulating our rod hand, trying to get those flies drifting nicely. Now it has its disadvantages. High sticking is a great technique for short range fishing, but it doesn't work really well when you're fishing at long range. I can't high stick all the way over there. I can't lift that much line off the water. And if I do lift that much line off the water, the fly's dragging anyway, there's no point. So that doesn't work very well for that. But at short range, it's deadly. Another thing to keep in mind, you also don't want to lift too high and drag the fly around like this. See how I'm actually pulling the fly around? You're lifting a little too high then. So it's a fine line. You want to leave about, I don't know, 1 foot to 3 foot of leader on the water. Depends on the situation, but leave a little bit of leader stuck on the water just so that fly remains drag free. That's high sticking. Now high sticking is easier with some techniques than others. Single dry fly is probably the hardest technique because there's nothing to anchor the fly to the water. It's all very touchy, very sensitive. An indicator nymph rig is really easy to high stick because we've got heavy nymphs and a big indicator anchoring that fly to the water. It allows us to be a little more aggressive with our high sticking. Nevertheless though, it's the same technique whether we're drifting a dry fly or a nymph down the river. Well, that's high sticking in a nutshell. It's a great technique to have in your bag. It's awesome for drifting flies naturally, and you'll guarantee catch more fish if you're high sticking properly. Hope it helps. Cheers.